What is the creepiest thing you've seen in the woods, or in the mountains, or in deserts, or caves, or in small towns, or in big cities, or in hotels, or in remote or rural areas, or while asleep, or home alone, or while on large bodies of water, or while on an aircraft or a nautical vessel? I was up north, far north British Columbia, Canada, working in an oil rig camp out in the woods. I was working as a cook. I went out one afternoon for a smoke on the back deck. It was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It was a very quiet, still winter day. It was snowing, those kind of big snowflakes that make it look like the world is moving in slow motion. So as I was standing there smoking, just staring off in the distance, not looking at anything particular, looking left, right, up, down at my feet, whatever, I felt something looking at me. Then I looked straight ahead. About 30 feet or less in front of me was the tree line of the forest, and directly in front of me, in between two trees, I see the most gigantic wolf I have ever seen. This thing sitting looked like it was the size of a man standing. It was massive, sitting there and just staring right at me. We locked eyes, then I looked away for a split second and then looked back and it was gone. I don't know. It just gave me the weirdest feeling. It was definitely like, hey, I see you. I could eat you, but I won't. K-bye. Something I'll always remember. Was camping at a state park in Texas and went out night fishing with my dog. Rose my bike to the dock and left it about 100 feet from the front of the dock in the parking lot. The dock is still in wet shoreline with that marsh grass for a good 20 to 30 feet before it's actually above the water. Dog and I sitting and fishing for maybe 20 minutes when a massive gator drifted up. I guess he was attracted to my hook splashes because the rest of the lake was dead quiet and still as glass. He looked like a whole tree floating in the water until his eyes hit the dock light and lit up, locked with mine. I continued with my fishing for probably 3 hours while old boy hung around, following me from side to side of the dock. When I decided to leave, he started following me up the shore. I take care around wildlife and I love animals, but I was honestly terrified in that moment. Looking at my bike and knowing gators can run pretty fast and my dog would definitely try to fight it. Figured my only weapon was a distraction and took a piss off the far side of the dock. While Gator Boy was searching my pee water for the dying fish he heard, I took my dog and ran. I've told this before, but once I was staying at this lodge with my family. It was pretty rustic. Our rooms did not have TVs or anything. There was all types of activities you could do on the grounds of this lodge. Its main attraction was this giant lake where they had part of it sectioned off to swim in, and then another part you could kayak in. Or if you wanted, you could take a canoe out into the main lake. You could rent bikes, hike the trails. They had kids' activities going throughout the days. Hopefully you get the idea. Well, one of the activities was this rope obstacle course contraption. A huge vertical climbing gym with ropes and logs and platforms. So my stepmom, my dad, my 2 younger brothers, and myself all climbed up this thing, then back down. We had the whole course area to ourselves since it was unusually cold that day. So once our session was over, the 2 employees left, and we stayed opting to hike back to the lodge on our own. It was about a 2-mile hike. So my stepmom and myself start to explore the area and find a gravel road with a trail next to it. We start walking the trail, which is going the opposite way from the lodge. After about 15 minutes, we hear a car coming. It's a small sport convertible. It zooms around this curve, and as it does, the driver throws a manila file with tons of papers out of the car. The papers go flying everywhere. Car's gone. The papers were doctor's notes, charts, reports, history about one person. They were all very disturbing, trying to diagnose this patient. There were handwritten notes on outbursts this patient had, medicine he was on, his family history. There was tons of these papers scattered everywhere. Some handwritten, some typed. Others looked like graphs or charts. So we spent a few hours looking at these notes. I'm sure my stepmom could go into more detail on the papers. I was still too young to realize how strange the whole thing was. We also found a really cheap brown wig further up the trail, and a suitcase with even more documents. All on just one person. We ended up leaving everything there and calling the non-emergency number and explaining the whole thing. I don't know if anything came of it. I don't know if there was any mental hospital close by. I do remember it was a Sunday around 3 p.m. So, my friend and I were hanging out with 2 of her guy friends Friday night after school. And the plans were that we were having a sleepover at my friend's house. We were just hanging out around town, nothing much to do in a small Georgia town, but walk around the town square and go to the trails. Well, after shooting the shit for a couple of hours, we got hungry and ordered a pizza for pickup. We got the pizza and drove to a pretty quiet neighborhood where one of the guys lived. The neighborhood was kind of tucked away into a forest, so it was really quiet and really dark in that area of town. As we were sitting there outside, eating pizza, using the hood of the car as a makeshift table, I looked up and saw what looked like a large pitch-black mass that resembled a primate in shape and movement, swinging high in the trees that had to be a good 800 feet away from us. Even from that distance in the night, it looked so huge. But that made no sense as we live in a small town in Georgia. There are no large primates here. I alerted everyone to this figure in the trees, and we were all baffled and amazed at what we were seeing. I remember just having this sense of dread washing over me as I looked at this figure, trying to make sense of what I'm seeing. Then, it seemed like it noticed us. We couldn't see any distinct features, and the figure was pitch black, but somehow, you just knew that it was watching you. Suddenly, this shadow, ape-like figure stood tall, and you could almost see it shifting before your eyes as it began to resemble more closely the shape of a large man, holding onto a branch with one arm, just staring at us with unseen eyes. Everyone was frozen so still and so quiet. It seemed like the sounds of the night froze in place with us. We were just transfixed on this dark figure in the trees. Then this creature crouched over, and as it did, its shoulders seemed to stretch impossibly higher, reaching over its head. All of us were in shock and terrified at seeing this, maybe a little in denial as what we were seeing was defying any logical explanation, because you want this to make sense. And then this. Creatures. Shoulders, for lack of a better word or better way to explain this, seemed to just grow into these huge wings. Then this dark figure jumped off the branch and flew off. I knew what I was seeing was real because when that happened, we all ran to the car without talking, just screaming as fast as possible, and sped away from there. We were all freaking out, trying to find any logical reason that could explain what we had just witnessed. But there was none. Needless to say, no one slept that night. We were all too terrified that maybe that thing follow us back to my friend's house. I should also mention this was back in 2010, so no good camera phones to capture whatever we saw back then. My girlfriend, a couple friends, and I visited this abandoned old amphitheater in upstate New York near a mostly empty old mining town. It was supposedly haunted after like 5 murders happened there in the 50s. People had told us that if we wanted a real experience that we should go there. So we did. It was a cold night in the fall, and it took us forever to find it and a while to even find our way inside. We had flashlights and those disposable 35mm cameras. We heard crazy shit, and in one room chairs literally slid across a floor. But the super fucked part was when my buddy's girlfriend screamed, said something grabbed her. She was absolutely inconsolable, so we bounced. In the car, she insisted we look at the back of her arm, and it was a bite mark. Not some little thing, guys. Like upper and lower teeth, red and bruised. It looked like a small game trap had closed on her arm. We took probably 100 pictures in there, and the guy at the Walmart development place said none of the rolls came out, like they had been exposed to light. As a kid, I lived in a camper in the woods on my grandma's huge-ass property. I have no idea how much land she owned, but it was huge. Not like little kid version. Wow, this is huge, but actually huge. Grandma had a farm, including cows. A storm shut down the power, which shut down the electric fence, and a cow got out. So the next day, my teenage cousins come to go find the cow, and little 6-year-old me put on some snow boots and went with them. Again, this place is huge. We walked around for hours. Sometimes we would find what we thought might have been tracks, but then they would just stop. Eventually, we get to a part where none of us had ever been. Weren't allowed because there was a super unruly creek. You slip, and you're probably never found. We were about to turn back and give up when we saw a cow grazing. I was like, this isn't the cow we're looking for. How did this get here? We get closer and this thing is wild. Like borderline feral. It was not grazing on grass, but the cow we were looking for. Obviously, we booked it back to the house thinking this cannibal cow was going to absolutely kill us. Like, they can't even do that, right? tell Grandma what we found, and we thought she'd call us crazy, but her and their dad was like, was it almost completely black? Yes, hard to tell because it was filthy, but I think so. Turns out there was a storm a couple years ago where a cow got out and they never found it. They assumed something in the woods ate it. They figured that's what happened to this cow too, but let us go look anyways for funsies. Well, it was getting eaten in the woods by the other cow. They went to try to find it, and the cow carcass, and they found the carcass. Cow had been struck by lightning and was dead before the cannibal cow ate it. And it didn't eat much at all, but to us kids it looked like a lot. Anyways, that's the first time I saw a dead cow, and the first and only time I saw a cow eating another cow. No clue what happened to Cannibal Cow. Oh, also same property. 5 people murdered. Also not the first time an animal got hit by lightning. Grandma had a blind pony that was blinded because it was hit by lightning. Mostly blind anyways. I think it could kind of see still. It died years later because they think maybe just age, but it went deaf and fell down a hill and died. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Here's another video for you to watch.